Hi, welcome to our SFI biweekly briefing on Tuesdays at 2. I'm Sarah Streyder, Executive Director of Secure Families Initiative. And today I am lucky to have a special guest whom I will bring on in a minute. So don't worry, it will not just be me you will be hearing from. But before we get there, I do want to quickly give one top line update since our last biweekly briefing. So last time we talked about AUMFs, very exciting topics. And at the time, we said that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee was scheduled to have a briefing and to have a vote on that AUMF the week that we did our last briefing. But as with all things Congress, it got postponed. So they actually just had their public hearing this morning, which went pretty well. And they're scheduled, hopefully, to vote on this bill tomorrow. So I mentioned this as an update because we mentioned last briefing that there would be an action alert tied to that vote. And don't worry, you didn't miss anything. It's still going to happen. It just didn't happen when we expected it to last time. So stay tuned tomorrow morning for both the vote and the action item that SFI is going to be sending out to make sure that we forward this bill. As we talked about last time, it's super important that we advance this bill that's going to get rid of an outdated authorization that has put a lot of military families at unnecessary risk. So anyway, enough about AUMFs. Let's get to the core issue that we're here to talk about this afternoon, another acronym, SIVs. I know, super exciting alphabet soup over here at SFI. SIVs are special immigrant visas, and here to shed his expertise on this issue is my colleague from Veterans for American Ideals, Chris Purdy. So if Chris Purdy can join the broadcast. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Sarah, how's it going?
Going okay. Could you introduce yourself and your organization, please?
Yeah, my name's Chris Purdy. I'm the program manager at Vets for American Ideals. We are a project of Human Rights First, which is a national organization that advocates for lots of human rights issues. Right now, it's mostly what I'm focusing on as a special immigrant visa holder, and you can't have an SIV without an AUMF. So I'm glad that I don't know if I'm glad, but anyways, it's interesting to hear these two worlds collide. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got, do you have a dictionary by your desk to make sure you're tracking the right?
No, I probably should though. Probably should.
There you go. Well, awesome. We're really glad to have you here, Chris, because there have been a lot of news kind of updates on the SIV issue. And along with that comes a lot of open-ended questions from a lot of our members. So we were really hoping you could help kind of clarify a few things. So to kind of start at the get-go, could you give us a little bit of background? What is the Special Immigrant Visa Program, and why is it so important for U.S. national security?
Yeah, it is really a very important program, and it's something that has been around for quite a while, and people might not have known about it. They might have kind of heard about it in the background, but basically in 2008 and 2009, Congress created this legislation that would allow individuals who work for the U.S. government, who have a period of time of faithful service, to go through a process to have expedited access to the legal permanent resident program, a green card, for example, or not for example, that's what people colloquially know it as. So the idea, in theory, is that an individual who worked for up until last week 2 years, now 1 year, worked for 2 years for U.S. government, they would go through a process that will ideally take them 9 months. And they'll get their background check. They'll get an employer verification letter that says, yes, this person did work for the U.S. government. They'll get a health check. They'll do all these other different things. They'll get to the front of the line of the green card process, and they'll be expeditiously emigrated into the United States after that time. Since 2008, I think we've resettled about 81,000 SIVs from both Iraq and Afghanistan. The Iraqi program sunset in 2014. And the Afghan program is what we're fighting for right now, and to make sure that that is fully funded, it's fully resourced, and most importantly, in the light of where Afghanistan is right now, as far as the security situation, that those individuals who are in the pipeline are actually taken out of Afghanistan while they are going through their process, so that they can be safely and securely vetted and then processed maybe in U.S. territory, in a third country, or something like that. And so, throughout their process, that they're not under constant threat of the Taliban, and at the end of that, that will end up them having to come to the United States. Now, why is that important? Why is it important that we get them out of the U.S. or out of Afghanistan? Well, I said 9 months is the ideal, right? That's what Congress intended this program to last. or to take the time it takes. In reality, it takes about 4.5 years for an individual who, after those 2 years of service, then goes and applies for this program. It takes them 4.5 years or so to get through that. And then in the whole meantime, they're going through living their life in Afghanistan, and they're under the constant threat of the Taliban. We just don't have that amount of time as we get ready to draw down from Afghanistan. So that was a long-winded answer. I don't know if that explained anything or what, but that's kind of where we're at.
Awesome. It explained many things. So thanks, Chris. So just to quickly clarify a couple of things. So first and foremost, would you say that having this kind of expedited process like you described is important? Because it's a tool, right? It's a tool in being able to recruit allies on the front end, and then a tool of demonstrating that, yes, America keeps its promise to allies that it works with and partners with to ensure their safety and well-being for the future. Does that seem like an accurate assessment of why having this tool in our toolbox is so important?
It's absolutely critical. In every conflict that we've been in the past 30 years, well, it really going back to as far back as we've done foreign engagements, we've relied on local partners on the ground. And up until recently, we had no way to reward them or promise them safety after their time in service with the U.S. And so this allows us to do that. And so we had one in Iraq, we have one in Afghanistan. Congressman Crow right now is trying to get one for Syria, and that's a longer push. But we really, what this requires, and that's maybe taking a step back, is a broader reassessment of how we look at our foreign engagements and how we look at people who work with us overseas, and maybe come up with some sort of standing program. But this is really important to both our national honor and prestige, and being able to say that we honor our commitments. But it's also really important to the troops on the ground. People are going to go overseas, and they're going to rely on partners in those countries. And if the folks who are serving in those conflicts areas don't have anyone they can trust, that's going to make their job much more difficult and dangerous.
I'm glad you underlined that. And I'm also glad you specified. I don't think I even realized that these were very country specific. I thought it was this kind of broad thing. So that's good for me to know. So once you described the onboarding process, how someone applies, how long it takes, all of the hoops that they have to go through normally, and we'll talk a little bit about the most recent updates. But real quickly, I'm curious, what happens once someone does get brought to the United States and chooses to come over? Like, what does that transition look like? Is there a kind of a process in place or a service?
Yeah. So once they go through the process, they become legal permanent residents, green card holders. They can work, they can live, but they are given access to the U.S. Refugee Assistance Program, and they're resettled by one of the 9 resettlement agencies in the country. They typically go to one of 20 cities. They don't have to go to one of those 20 cities, but these are cities where the U.S. government has specifically set up resources for Afghans and individuals in the SFI process. They work with their local resettlement agency to kind of get established in the community, English language classes, acculturation, all that fun stuff. And then these people become, fully fledged members of society. They start businesses. They do. They engage in their communities. They become community leaders. Lots of them end up going back into the military. Actually, there's a high prevalence of individuals who are SIVs and then joined the Army, the Marines, or Air Force, or whatever, and then redeploy back to their homelands. That happens much more frequently than I think people are aware of.
Certainly than I was aware of. So thanks for mentioning that. Okay, so we've made reference to the regular process and like the current iteration of it. And so you touched on the fact that there have been both congressional legislation passed as well as moves by the executive branch, the president, to somewhat expedite the process, as well as come up with some sort of a temporary placement for people who are already in the pipeline, so that nothing happens kind of in the interim. Could you kind of give a high-level summary of where things are at now and how you feel about that? Like, is this everything you always hoped and fought for? Are there anything left that we really need to pay close attention to?
Yeah. There's a lot left. There's a lot left that needs to be done. So up until recently, well, there are about 20,000 people that are left in the SIV pipeline in Afghanistan right now. That is split roughly 50-50 between people who have completed the first part of the process, which is called Chief of Mission. And actually that Chief of Mission process is like 14 steps. So it's not exactly one stage. And then the other 50% are people who have got that Chief of Mission, and then they're going on to do the other different checks. The Chief of Mission stage are people who are getting their paperwork together. Actually, lots of them, about 30% of them, have their paperwork all together and are just waiting for the administration to review it and check it out. So these are folks who are waiting. That obviously the Taliban doesn't differentiate between whether you have your packet in front of the U.S. government or not, and so it's really important when we consider who we're talking about saving right now. It is all 20,000 people. Not just the people who have finished that first step. So I just want to get off the bat the numbers that we're talking about. And when I say 20,000, those are 20,000 applicants. Applicants each come with about 3 to 4 family members. And so in the Afghan process, I should say, the Iraqi process is a little different. But in the Afghan context, it's about 3 to 4 family members. So when you take that in total, we're talking about 100,000 people that need to be relocated out of Afghanistan expeditiously. We've been leading a charge for the past 5 months or so to get the U.S. government to evacuate these people, to actually get them on planes, get them out of the country, bring them to the U.S. and start processing them so that they can, I think I mentioned this earlier, they can do all that in peace without threat of the Taliban. The U.S. government has started bringing in flights of about, I think, two flights, about 200 people each, so roughly 400 and so individuals have landed in the Northern Virginia area and are in Richmond or Petersburg, Virginia right now processing. This should be considered, this is very welcome news, right? We are very excited that the U.S. government has started this. However, when we're talking about who those 400 people are, those are not 400 applicants, number one. Those are 400 families. And so we think that's maybe about 100 to 120 applicants out of the 20,000. And two, these are people who are at the very end of the pipeline, very end, and meaning only thing they had left to do was get a medical check that is now no longer even necessary, given that legislation was just passed last week, eliminating that requirement. So while it's great that they're here and it's great that they've condensed their travel schedule, this is really not the evacuation that we're calling for, but it is something that should be celebrated. Now, the administration has said publicly that they are going to resettle up to 4,000 or 5,000 of the Afghans who are in the post Chief of Mission process. So these are the people post that first stage. They're going to evacuate them to a third country. Kuwait, Qatar have been suggested. Kazakhstan has also been suggested. There are a lot of problems with bringing them to a third country. We believe those people, well, frankly, all people should be brought to U.S. territory. And we believe that they should be brought to U.S. territory specifically because the process has been very bureaucratic. There's been lots of delays, lots of problems. And there have been unintentional denials that are often overturned on appeal. So an individual gets one chance to appeal the process, and 80% of the time those appeals go through. And so we want them to come to U.S. territory. So in the case that their appeal is rejected and there is some other mitigating circumstance, they can apply for asylum. So we're calling this the asylum backstop. This is really long-winded, so if I'm going too much, just cut me off, and because I could go on forever. The other critical thing of this, why that asylum backstop might not be as necessary as it was a week ago, is yesterday the State Department issued what's called a Priority 2 program within the refugee admissions program. So what this means is that the State Department has designated an entire group of people as priority refugees, which means they can go to the front of the line, and there is a cap of about 62,000 people that the U.S. could admit this fiscal year, of which they've only admitted about 3,000. So there's 59,000 left. That's how math works. So it might not be as important that they are resettled to U.S. territory. It is for that reason, because they could then be caught up in the refugee program, if not asylum. But there are a whole other reasons why we want them to come to U.S. territory. And this is the last point. I'll stop on my monologue, and then we'll go on to the next question. The last reason why we think they really need to come to U.S. territory, even though that we've checked the box on this protected immigration system through the refugee program in a third country, is what we're learning in our Fort Lee arrivals is that these are highly complicated cases, and the individuals need access to counsel. And even though these are folks at the end of the line who theoretically they should just be able to breeze through the legal process, we've had reports of attorneys spending 8, 10, 12 hours on individual cases in Fort Lee. And so if we're going to be relocating 5,000 applicants and their families to a third country, who's going to provide them with legal resources, and how are we going to make sure that these cases go through in the amount of time that needs to go through? So I just said a lot. I'm not sure even if I've answered your question, but happy to answer any clarifying questions on that.
I appreciate that. I think this is a great case study in how complex advocacy can become, because it's not just a matter of Congress passing a bill or the president signing an executive order. You're also engaging with all these departments and agencies that are part of the executive branch, and how little changes in policies week to week can make a big difference for a campaign that you and your organization has been part of for years. So anyway, I think definitely I believe in the membership of SFI to be able to deal with the complexity of the issues. We're all pretty used to that when it comes to deciphering DoD stuff and all here and there. But I think what it sounds like to me, the big level takeaways are, we've seen a lot of recent positive reactions from legislators, both legislative and executive, to react positively to this issue that we've been kind of clamoring them to pay attention to, and take steps that have gone in the correct direction. But there's still a long way to go between here and us accomplishing the goal of ensuring every single SIV applicant gets to safety and gets processed appropriately. So I really appreciate how in the weeds that you have been and tracking every single detail and contingency. I guess it might be really helpful to kind of summarize things a little bit, just to share, what is it that drives you personally, based on your experience as a veteran, someone who's dedicated himself to this issue in particular above all issues. I mean, not above all, you know what I mean? Has prioritized this as important. Like, why bother to pay attention to all of this minutia? What's your why?
Well, I'm a nerd, number one. Well, and also number two, I was in Iraq in 2011. I was one of the last troops out of the country, and so I saw the way that we left there, and was really disheartened by that and that process. I have vivid memories of people being left behind who shouldn't be left behind, and so. I got into this work as a volunteer a long time ago, primarily because of that. To be able to be part of an organization that has such in-depth legal, resources and expertise that can help us really move the needle on something like that. It's really important to be able to have another crack, another go at it. The other thing is, I'll say, and I don't say this too often, but on a personal note, my family emigrated from Northern Ireland, Belfast, Northern Ireland. And so, and I visited my family in the 90s in Belfast. And for those of you who don't know, there was a civil war that ended in 1998 in Northern Ireland. And so I really understood what it meant to grow up and to live in a conflict zone, and to live in an area where you didn't know who your friends were, who was elements of your family might be on one side, another element of your family might be on another side. And so it is very real to me when these people say, that their neighbors don't trust them, and that their neighbors are going to, potentially hurt them, because I've seen that happen. And so I think those two things combined are really what drive me in this particular case.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I get that. All right. As you said, the fight is not over. There's still more to be done. How can grassroots supporters, volunteers, members like our members, what can they do to support you and your mission? Is there an action item y'all are pushing right now in particular, or is following the best way to kind of stay tuned? What do you got?
Yeah, well, we can send an action alert around, so you all can click on that and have that. But really, what we want is, while this is an executive branch problem, this is a State Department, this is an NSC problem, Congress has a lot to say on it. And so they have all gone home, ostensibly, for the month of August, and they are listening to their constituents. And what we are asking are people to go to their members and saying, hey, we need to keep on this. There's been a lot of work that's been done. There was a law that was passed. You have these flights that are coming in. We need to make sure that this does not stop, because our biggest fear right now, frankly, if I could just be real, our biggest fear is that this initial tranche of evacuees or arrivals at Fort Lee are going to come in, and the administration is going to say, look, we did it, check the box, mission accomplished. When we know that that's less than 2% or 3% of those who are really need our help. So Congress needs to go out there, and they need to make as clear of a voice and as consistently as possible that they care about this issue. And they have done that, right? There was a bill passed last week in the House, 416 to 17 or something like that, or 406 to 17. I mean, when does bills like that get passed? So the administration must take that as a measure, saying, oh, Congress really cares about this. They want this to get done. And so, but that drumbeat needs to keep happening. And I really want to give a shout out to members like Congressman Moulton and Congressman Crow and all the other members of the Honoring Our Promises working group, the delegate from Guam. I mean, I could just go on. They have been, out front in the trenches on this, and we'd love for other members to join that working group. Those are the asks, I guess, right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right, you guys, you heard it. Go to your town halls, raise this issue as often as possible. You do not need to be as nerdy and wonky as Chris is in order to still speak powerfully as to why it's important. And we will follow up with a more specific action item and maybe a little more details even as well. So make sure you're following Secure Families Initiative, that you're following Vets for American Ideals. I know a few, incidentally, Chris, I know y'all did an event at the beginning of July, and I know a few SFI members who were eager to attend. So thank you for hosting that and showing that demonstrations can be part of our organizing strategy of making change. So I think that's really great. Yeah. Okay, you have your action takeaway. Any last words, Chris?
No, thanks for listening. And I know this was all in the weeds, but I mean, really what it comes down to is this is a moral obligation, but it's a national security imperative as well. So
absolutely,
take that and run with it. And thank you, Sarah, for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Tune in 2 weeks from now for our next biweekly briefing. We're going to go back to doing kind of a news summary next time, but thanks for tuning in this time. Appreciate it. Bye.